Chapter 59. Lee Cherie began to reckon time in terms of Julietta. When Julietta brought lunch, it was noon. When Julietta brought dinner, it was 6 in the evening. When Julietta emptied the chamber pot, it was either 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., for whatever difference that was worth. When Julietta fetched her to the third-floor bath, seldom used by Max or Tilly, for a scrubbing, the princess knew that it was Saturday, and another week had passed. After 90 baths, 90 soapings of the peach fish, her lover would be eligible for parole. Julietta was her clock and her calendar. Time was a skinny old woman with dilated pupils. As for space, it came to be less defined by the walls of the attic, more defined by the camel pack. The camel pack was a rectangular solid, 2 3/4 inches high, 2 1/8 inches wide, and 3/4 of an inch deep. Imagine Lee Cherie's eyes crawling over every crinkle in the cellophane. Imagine Lee Cherie gazing expectantly, her eyes like a couple of goldfish with insufficient water in their bowls. As an environmentalist, she might have been more interested in the chamber pot. Not only did the pot have a benevolent, ecologically sound function, but its round shape, as biomorphic as a breast, melon, or moon, evoked the natural world. Yet it was the camel pack, all right angles and parallel lines, the formal equivalent of the rational mind. It was the camel pack, born on the drawing board, far from the bulrushes. It was the camel pack, of a shape designed to shield us from the capricious, which is to say the inexplicable. It was the logically, synthetically geometric camel pack that enlivened the air of her cell. In the evening, about a quarter till Julietta empty chamber pot, Lee Cherie would wake to find the camel pack beside her cot. It had the poise of an animal. Some mornings it would be lying on the foam rubber beside her unpillowed head, like a jewel forced out of her ear by a dream. Once, or maybe twice, lying there in the morning, she placed the pack mischievously in the nest of her pubis. What a strange bird laid this egg. What strange bird laid this egg? What strange bird laid this egg? Anyway, she spent a lot of time tossing the camel pack in the air and catching it. She became skilled to the point where she could catch it behind her back, over her shoulder, in her teeth, or with her eyes closed. Prancing with it, she incorporated it into some old cheerleader routines. Mostly, though, she just sat holding it, staring into its exotic vistas, populating its landscape, colonizing it, learning to survive there. When crossing the desert, she learned to swaddle herself in a burnous, the way the natives did. Redheads burn easily. She learned which stones one could squeeze water from. She learned to appreciate the special reality of the mirage. One day, she believed that she heard the rat-a-tat of a woodpecker, but search as she might, she could find no bill holes in the trunks of the palms. Whether on foot or camelback, Lee Cherie went about with eyes downcast. Lee Cherie was looking for matchsticks. She looked for the print of black boots in the sand. Chapter 60. Baths went by. Meals passed. Deposits were made in the chamber pot and subsequently withdrawn. Springtime turned slowly to summer. By the end of June, it was so stuffy in the attic it was difficult to breathe, but there was always a cool breeze at the oasis. Lee Cherie would sit in the shade by the spring playing toss and catch with her package of camels. For hours on end she would toss and catch, while from the spring waters big old green amphibians spied on her with the voyeuristic bulbousness that can trap beauty and fix a thing forever. She was reminded of Aben Fizzle, the look he had when he was courting her. Periodically, nomads came to the spring. They, men as well as women, wore hand-hammered silver jewelry that jangled like cash registers in a shopkeeper's dream of heaven. Their antique rifles were as long as fishing poles, and the clay jugs that they filled with water were made back when Jesus was just a gleam in the one big eye. Berbers came and Bedouins driving their dromedaries to drink. Sheiks came, sheiks without oil wells or sons at Oxford, but who nevertheless wore robes that would pump up the egos of every silkworm in the East, and who vanished in clouds of perfume so thick they made the princess cough. Invariably, she questioned those traders, raiders, belly dancers, Alibabas, and caravan executives about any red-haired outlaws they might have passed on their route, while they in turn hit her up for cigarettes. But I can't open the pack, she'd try to explain. If I did, all of this would collapse. A successful external reality depends on an internal vision that is left intact. They glared at her in the way an intelligent person's ought to glare, when what they need is a smoke, a bite, a cup of coffee, a piece of ass, or a good fast-paced story, and all they're getting is philosophy. Chapter 61. It was July, about the time that King Max lost $40 on the All-Star game and Julieta ran out of cocaine. That Lee Cherie realized that her body had made a private compact with the moon. With a minimum of effort, she had begun to rotate on the lunar wheel. At night, when the light was off, the attic normally was as black as the Franks at a firebug's weenie roast. In that part of the world, however, the full moon always rose in the east, and on those nights when the moon was biggest and brightest, a shaft of its light would spear the one clear window pane and pierce her sleeping body. By May, she was menstruating regularly at the new moon, and just as the ancients did, and in July she observed that she had begun to ovulate when the moon was full. And will any healthy woman whose nights are not polluted by synthetic lighting? She could always tell when she's about to ovulate because her vaginal mucus would become wetter and more abundant than usual, and more smooth and slippery too. Her glands were greasing the tracks, as it were, for the sperm express. Of course, testing for ovulation can be hazardous, since a primed vagina, in its enthusiasm, can mistake an exploratory finger for a serviceable phallus and try to draw it in. Her resistance was admirable, however. It did not quite, if not quite heroic. And the mucus tests proved that she had begun inadvertently but successfully to practice lunaception. As an advocate of lunaception, Bernard would have been proud of her. Bernard would have been proud despite this irony, now that her periods were predictable and her ovulation pinpointed. Now that she was capable of conceiving or not conceiving at her own discretion, now that she finally had solved the problem of birth control, it was all academic. The sperm express didn't run through the attic on Puget Sound. Still, it was pleasing to her to prove Bernard's theory, and she derived, moreover, a sense of power and well-being from the sensation of being in touch with her biological cycles, and of them being in harmony with the rhythms of the cosmos. She wondered how the moon, 239,000 miles above the roof, could affect her as profoundly as it did. Being 4 times larger than the moon, the Earth appeared to dominate. Caught in the Earth's gravitational web, the moon moved around the Earth and could never get away. Yet, as any half-awake materialist knows, that which you hold holds you. Neither could the Earth escape the moon. The moon conducts our orchestra of waters. It is keeper at the hive of blood. In a magnetic field, every object exerts force on every other object. The moon is an object, after all, like a golden ball, like a pack of cigarettes. The fabric of even those objects that seem densest is, in actual fact, a loose weaving of particles and waves. These differences and interactions between objects have their roots in the interference patterns produced along combined frequencies of vibration. What it amounted to was that Lee Cherie was exerting force on the camel pack, and it on her. Surely such force had to do with the physical nature of the pack, its size, weight, shape, chemical composition, and above all proximity, and not with the pictorial content that adorned it. Ah, but the pictorial symbols have their own weight and gravity, as the history of religion vividly demonstrates. And while Lee Cherie found herself in a relationship with the Camelback as an object, just as she was in relation to the moon as an object, just as you, the reader, have a relationship with this book as an object, no matter if you can tolerate another line of its content. She deciphered from the symbology of the Camelback design what appeared to be the long-lost message of the Redheads of Argon. That might have been the major discovery of the last quarter of the 20th century. On the other hand, it might have been the kind of rat hair in the tuna tin that can eventually confront the person who pays too close attention, who simply looks too hard. Plato did claim that the unexamined life is not worth living. Oedipus Rex was not so sure.